You trust your doctor, right? Good. Because for most of human history, a visit to the doctor was less about healing and more about entering a bizarre, painful, and often deadly sideshow. For educational and entertainment purposes, we've collected 101 of the dumbest medical treatments people paid for. Do not attempt any of them. Some are hilarious, some are horrifying, but all of them are real. Let's begin. 1. In ancient Egypt, the go-to remedy for a toothache was a delightful paste made from a mashed-up dead mouse. Yes, they would literally take a deceased rodent, pound it into a pulp, and pack it onto your aching gum. You'd probably be too busy dealing with the taste of dead vermin to even notice your toothache anymore. 2. Before we understood germs, there was sympathetic medicine. If you got stabbed, you didn't treat the wound. Oh no, that's crazy talk. You treated the sword that stabbed you. You'd wash the weapon, wrap it in bandages, and keep it warm, while your actual wound was left to fester. The sword made a full recovery. The patient? Not so much. 3. In the 18th century, if you nearly drowned, the hot new medical procedure was a tobacco smoke enema. A rescuer would use a special bellows to blow tobacco smoke directly into your rectum. The idea was that the warm, stimulating smoke would encourage respiration. Imagine being saved from drowning only to have a stranger show up to hotbox your colon. 4. Doctors in ancient Greece believed a woman's uterus could detach and wander freely through her body, causing everything from depression to fainting. Their high-tech solution? They would use pleasant smells to lure the organ back into place from below, and foul odors near her mouth to scare it from going too high. They treated a major organ, like a lost cat. 5. Worried about going bald? Ancient Roman philosopher Pliny the Elder had the perfect solution: a topical cream whose ingredients included wine, saffron, and, most importantly, the fresh droppings of mice. It's unclear if it grew any hair, but it definitely guaranteed you'd never have to worry about anyone getting close enough to see your bald spot. 6. In the early 20th century, a wildly popular treatment for tuberculosis was something called plombage. Doctors would surgically collapse a lung to let it rest by stuffing the patient's chest cavity with random objects. And what did they use? Oh, just everyday items like ping pong balls, lucite spheres, or olive oil. 7. In the 1600s, a popular ingredient in European medicine was mumia, which was literally just ground-up ancient Egyptian mummies. You could buy it at any apothecary to cure headaches or stomach issues. People were literally eating other people for their health, proving that the stupidest ideas can last for centuries. 8. Before the discovery of Viagra, one man, John R. Brinkley, became a millionaire by surgically implanting goat testicles into men. He claimed this would cure impotence and restore virility. Thousands of desperate men paid a fortune for this procedure, proving that when it comes to certain problems, common sense is the first thing to go. 9. For centuries, the ultimate cure-all was trepanning, which is the simple, elegant act of drilling a hole in someone's skull. Got a headache? Drill a hole. Seizures? Drill a hole. Possessed by demons? You better believe we're drilling a hole. It was the "have you tried turning it off and on again" of ancient medicine. 10. To cure a stutter in the 19th century, some surgeons believed in a direct approach. Just cut off half the patient's tongue. The theory was flawlessly simple. You can't stutter if you can barely speak at all. It was a permanent solution to a temporary problem, brought to you by people who should have never been allowed near sharp objects. 11. For centuries, the #1 cure for syphilis was mercury. Doctors would have you rub it on your skin, inject it, or even eat it. This brilliant treatment came with fun side effects like your teeth falling out, severe nerve damage, and insanity. The good news? You might forget you even had syphilis. 12. Got a fever? Feeling weak? In the 18th century, the answer was always bloodletting. They believed draining your blood would balance your humors. So, to cure your weakness, they'd make you significantly weaker by removing the very fluid that keeps you alive. It's like trying to fix a leaky tire by slashing the other 3. 13. In the Victorian era, arsenic wasn't just a poison, it was a beauty product. Women would eat arsenic wafers or put it in face creams to achieve a fashionably pale complexion. It worked by destroying red blood cells, so you definitely got that ghostly look, especially once you became an actual ghost. 14. The ancient Romans had a secret ingredient for pearly white teeth: urine. Specifically, imported Portuguese urine, which was believed to be the strongest. They used it as a daily mouthwash. Because nothing says fresh breath like gargling with someone else's week-old fermented bodily waste from another country. 15. In medieval times, a popular cure for warts and other ailments was the Hand of Glory. This involved touching the afflicted area with the severed hand of a recently executed criminal. It was believed the shock of the touch had healing powers, and if it didn't, at least you had a killer story to tell. 16. Victorian doctors diagnosed countless women with female hysteria. The cure was a manual pelvic massage performed by the doctor until the patient achieved a hysterical paroxysm, or orgasm. Doctors complained of hand cramps, which led to the invention of the steam-powered vibrator. A true medical hero. 17. In the 1920s, people thought radiation was a health miracle. You could buy radium-infused water, chocolate, and even toothpaste. They promised a healthy, energetic glow. And you definitely got a glow, especially after your jawbone started to disintegrate from radiation poisoning. It was a killer smile. 18. One of the most horrifying treatments for rheumatism was to place the patient inside the carcass of a freshly killed animal, like a whale or a cow. The body heat and, juices were thought to have healing properties. It was like a day spa designed by a serial killer. 19. Erasmus Darwin, Charles Darwin's grandfather, invented a spinning chair to cure mental illness. The patient was strapped in and spun at high speed until they passed out or vomited profusely. The idea was to literally scramble their brain back to normal. It was less of a cure and more of a human centrifuge. 20. In the late 1800s, one of the most popular medicines for teething babies was Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup. The secret ingredients? A massive dose of morphine and alcohol. It was incredibly effective at quieting fussy babies, mainly by putting them into a narcotic stupor or, in many cases, a coma. 21. Queen Elizabeth I was famous for her stark white makeup. That look was achieved with a cosmetic called Venetian ceruse, which was a mixture of vinegar and pure lead. It slowly poisoned the user, causing skin decay, hair loss, and eventual death. She wasn't just a queen, she was a walking hazmat situation. 22. For centuries, a popular remedy was the King's Drops, a tincture made from a powdered human skull, often mixed with alcohol. It was believed to cure everything from epilepsy to headaches. You weren't just taking medicine. You were drinking the very essence of some poor soul's cranium. Cheers to that. 23. During the Renaissance, alchemists created potable gold, a liquid concoction of dissolved gold that was believed to grant youth and cure all diseases. It was incredibly expensive and did absolutely nothing, other than making your insides glittery as you died from whatever you actually had. The ultimate rich person's placebo. 24. Feeling constipated? The ancient Greeks might prescribe you a hemlock enema. For those who don't know, hemlock is the famously lethal poison that killed Socrates. It was a guaranteed way to clear your system, primarily by shutting down your entire nervous system and stopping your heart. Problem solved, permanently. 25. In ancient Egypt, one of the earliest forms of birth control was a pessary made of crocodile dung mixed with honey. Women would insert this delightful mixture before intimacy. It was probably effective mostly because it's hard to imagine anyone wanting to get near that in the first place. 26. Got low energy in the early 1900s? You needed an electric belt. These devices wrapped around your waist and delivered a constant, mild electric shock, promising to cure kidney disease, impotence, and nervousness. All they really did was give you a small, annoying jolt and a much lighter wallet. 27. For hundreds of years, a key ingredient in medicine was castoreum, a secretion from the anal glands of a beaver. It was used to treat everything from fevers to headaches. So next time you feel sick, just remember that your ancestors might have been prescribed a dose of beaver butt juice. 28. In the 18th century, if you needed dentures, the best ones were made from real human teeth pulled from the mouths of corpses, often soldiers who died in battle. You could finally get a perfect smile, you just had to ignore the fact that it used to belong to a dead guy. 29. Pliny the Elder wrote that a fantastic cure for hearing problems was to inject the juice of crushed ant eggs directly into the ear canal. It's unclear how they even came up with this idea. The only thing you'd probably hear after that is the faint sound of ants plotting their revenge. 30. To maintain good health, some physicians practiced issue pea therapy. This involved making a surgical incision in the patient's arm or leg, and then inserting a dried pea or a small bead under the skin to create a constantly weeping, pus-filled sore. The goal was to drain evil humors. Yes, they deliberately created infections to stay healthy. 31. The ice pick lobotomy was a disturbingly popular cure for mental illness. A doctor would take a tool resembling an ice pick, hammer it through the top of the eye socket, and just swish it around to sever brain connections. It was a 10-minute procedure that created a lifetime of vacant stares. 32. Got a cough? Forget cherry-flavored syrup. A popular 18th century remedy involved a paste of snails and sugar. You would either eat the sweetened snail slime or rub it on your chest. It was slow-acting, obviously, but probably more effective at making you lose your appetite than curing your cough. 33. For centuries, many cultures believed toothaches were caused by a tiny toothworm living inside your tooth. The cure? Inhaling the smoke from burning henbane seeds to make the worm fall out. The only problem is that henbane is a powerful hallucinogen. So while the toothworm wasn't real, the dragons flying out of your dentist's ears definitely were. 34. The ancient Romans believed the best cure for epilepsy was the fresh, warm blood of a fallen gladiator, drunk right at the arena. They thought it contained the warrior's life force. It was the original and most horrifying energy drink, served directly from the source. 35. Suffering from kidney stones in the 16th century? Your doctor might prescribe equitation. That's a fancy word for being forced to ride a horse at a gallop for hours on end. The idea was to literally shake the stones out of you. It was less a medical treatment and more a form of agonizing equestrian torture. 36. A popular throat medicine in the 1700s was album graecum, which is the elegant Latin term for dried white dog droppings. It was powdered and mixed with honey to soothe a sore throat. So when your mom said she'd wash your mouth out with soap, things could have been much, much worse. 37. Before we had quinine, one experimental treatment for malaria involved electric eels. A doctor would apply the live, writhing eels to the patient's body, delivering a series of powerful shocks. It rarely cured the malaria, but it definitely made the patient forget about their fever for a few electrifying minutes. 38. To ease the pain of childbirth, some 16th century physicians recommended strapping the laboring woman to a special table and shaking her violently. The goal was to dislodge the baby, like trying to get the last pickle out of a jar. It was a profoundly stupid idea that only added trauma to an already agonizing experience. 39. In medieval Europe, doctors practiced color therapy to treat smallpox. They believed the color red had healing powers. So, a patient would be dressed in red clothes, sleep in a red bed, and stay in a room with red walls and curtains. The disease wasn't impressed, but at least the decor was consistent. 40. In the 16th century, some European women replaced their own eyes with glass prosthetics for purely cosmetic reasons. They thought it gave them a more sparkling and serene look. They willingly blinded themselves for a fashion trend, which makes today's influencers seem downright reasonable. 41. The Fletcherism health craze of the early 1900s argued that you had to chew your food until it was completely liquid before swallowing, at least 100 chews per bite. Proponents even advocated for chewing their milk. It didn't cure anything, but it did make dinner last about 5 hours. 42. In the 1800s, hydrotherapy became a popular asylum treatment. This often meant blasting mentally ill patients with a high-pressure jet of ice-cold water for extended periods. Or they'd be forcibly submerged in a tub of freezing water for hours. It didn't cure insanity, but it was great at inducing hypothermia. 43. Need to lose some weight? In the early 1900s, one shocking method involved swallowing a tapeworm pill. The parasite would live in your intestines and eat a portion of your food, allowing for weight loss without dieting. The only downside was the malnutrition and the giant worm living inside you. Minor details. 44. Vincent Priesnitz, a 19th century farmer, invented the wet sheet wrap. He'd wrap patients naked in freezing wet linen sheets, then cover them with heavy blankets for hours. This was supposed to cure everything from a common cold to schizophrenia by inducing shock. It was basically a therapeutic human burrito of misery. 45. Before we understood digestion, some doctors believed cooking food removed its vital essence. This led to zomotherapy, where patients were prescribed a diet consisting of nothing but raw meat and raw meat juice. It was a great way to trade your original illness for a fun new case of salmonella or E. coli. 46. To fix a broken bone, some ancient healers recommended a poultice created from earthworms and wine. The process involved mashing up the worms, mixing them with a fine vintage, and smearing the wriggling paste over the fracture. It was probably less effective than a cast, but infinitely more disgusting. 47. Before anesthesia, surgeons had to be fast. The famous Dr. Robert Liston could amputate a leg in under 3 minutes. During one such procedure, he worked so fast that he accidentally amputated his assistant's fingers as well. Both the patient and the assistant later died of infection. A legendary 200% mortality rate. 48. In the Middle Ages, a common prescription for poor eyesight involved applying a gritty paste to the eyeballs. This concoction was made from the ashes of a burned scorpion, mixed with herbs and honey. Because when you can't see, the obvious solution is to rub powdered arachnid into your cornea. 49. The cat piano was a theoretical instrument designed to treat mental illness. It featured a line of cats with their tails pinned under a keyboard. When a key was pressed, it would strike a cat's tail, causing it to yowl in pain at a specific pitch. The morbid melody was supposed to shake a patient out of their stupor. 50. Before antibiotics, a gaping wound could be a death sentence. One popular folk remedy was to stuff the wound with fresh cow manure. The thinking was that the warmth and natural poultice effect would promote healing. Instead, it just introduced a billion new bacteria directly into the bloodstream. Shocking, I know. 51. In the 19th century, doctors believed a man's semen was a vital life force. Excessive loss of it, especially through masturbation, was blamed for everything from blindness to insanity. Their solution? Devices like the spermatic leash, a ring with sharp metal teeth worn on the penis to prevent nocturnal erections. 52. The Baunsheidism device was a 19th century German invention for curing rheumatism. It was basically a handle with dozens of sharp needles on the end. The doctor would repeatedly puncture your skin with it, then rub in a powerful irritant oil to create large weeping pustules, because a painful rash is way better than achy joints. 53. To treat jaundice in medieval times, a patient might be prescribed a meal of 9 lice mixed with ale. If that didn't work, a heaping spoonful of powdered earthworms was the next step. It's like the physicians were just daring their patients to see how much disgusting stuff they could stomach before giving up. 54. If you got rabies from a dog bite, one ancient Roman cure was to take hairs from that same dog, burn them, and stuff the ashes directly into the wound. It was a perfect example of like cures like logic, except the only thing it actually did was add another layer of filth to a lethal injury. 55. During the Great Plague of London, doctors wore bizarre bird-like masks with long beaks. These beaks weren't for style, they were stuffed with aromatic herbs and spices like mint and cloves. The idea was that this personal air filter would protect them from the miasma, or bad air, that they thought caused the plague. 56. In the late 1800s, Dr. John Harvey Kellogg, the inventor of cornflakes, believed yogurt enemas were a key to good health. He would pump several gallons of yogurt into a patient's colon, sometimes with the help of a machine, to balance their gut flora. He was obsessed with cleaning the bowel, one way or another. 57. The ancient Persians had a unique way of making important decisions: get drunk. They'd debate a matter while completely wasted, then reconsider it the next day while sober. If they agreed both times, the decision was made. They applied this to medicine too, which probably explains some of their more creative treatments. 58. Before germ theory, some surgeons believed that laudable pus, thick, creamy, white pus, was a good sign that a wound was healing properly. So, if your wound wasn't oozing enough, they might actually introduce bacteria from another patient's healthy, pus-filled wound into yours. They were literally sharing infections. 59. In the 18th century, aerotherapy involved sending patients to live in cowsheds. The theory was that the warm, ammonia-rich air from cow breath and manure had therapeutic properties for lung diseases. You'd spend your days breathing in the fumes of cow digestion in the hope of curing your tuberculosis. 60. For a sore throat, some ancient texts recommended a gargle made from raven's dung boiled in vinegar. If that was too extreme, you could try a milder option: a necklace made of dried toad guts. It's unclear which was more repulsive, the treatment or the disease. 61. The ancient Egyptians believed that the gods excreted through their pores, meaning their sweat was divine. Pharaohs would collect their sweat in jars and distribute it as a powerful healing potion. People would drink the holy perspiration of their rulers to cure all sorts of ailments. Talk about a personality cult. 62. A 17th century cure for gout, famously used by chemist Robert Boyle, was to apply medicated puppies to the afflicted area. This involved taking a live puppy and placing the still warm directly on the painful joint. It was an utterly useless procedure. 63. In the early 20th century, German surgeon August Beer experimented with spinal anesthesia, but ended up giving himself a horrific spinal headache. To cure it, he tried a session of beer drinking, a hot toddy, a full-body massage, and even being tied to a table and shaken. Nothing worked. 64. To combat the Black Death, some communities turned to flagellants. These were religious zealots who would walk from town to town, whipping themselves and each other into a bloody frenzy. They believed that by punishing themselves, God would spare their town from the plague. Instead, they just spread it faster. 65. A Renaissance-era remedy for infertility involved a man drinking a potion made from the boiled and powdered testicles of a rooster. It was thought that the virility of the bird would be transferred to him. The only thing transferred was probably salmonella, which doesn't exactly help with conception. 66. In the late 19th century, a popular treatment for female hysteria and anxiety was the rest cure. This involved forcing a woman to lie in bed for 6 to 8 weeks, forbidden from moving, talking, or even feeding herself. She would often be force-fed rich, fatty foods to gain weight, turning a medical treatment into a form of isolated psychological torture. 67. To prevent smallpox, some early attempts at inoculation involved variolation. This meant taking pus from an infected person's sore and rubbing it into a cut on a healthy person. It was a high-stakes gamble. You might get a mild case and become immune, or you might get a raging case and die. 68. A bizarre 19th century treatment for deafness was to pour a mixture of roasted pig fat, garlic juice, and worm slime into the ear canal. This was often followed by plugging the ear with a piece of bacon. It was less of a medical treatment and more of a recipe for the world's most disgusting ear infection. 69. To cure a fever, one ancient Babylonian practice involved sitting next to a dog. They believed the dog could literally draw the fever out of the human and into its own body. This was bad news for the patient, who remained sick, and even worse news for the poor dog, who was now the designated fever sponge. 70. In Victorian England, it was fashionable for women to have tiny waists, achieved by wearing extremely tight corsets. These devices crush their ribs and rearrange their internal organs, causing shortness of breath, fainting, and permanent skeletal deformities. All in the name of looking like a human hourglass. 71. In the 19th century, doctors treated diphtheria by painting the patient's throat with a solution of nitric acid. If that sounds insane, it is. The treatment was incredibly painful and often destroyed more tissue than the disease itself. It was like trying to put out a fire with a flamethrower. 72. A popular Roman cure for a hangover was to eat a deep-fried canary. Yes, the entire bird. Bones, beak, and all. They believed the crunchy, greasy snack would absorb the alcohol from the night before. It was probably more effective as a punishment to prevent you from ever drinking that much again. 73. Severe constipation in the past was often treated with a clister, a primitive metal syringe for enemas. One famous story involves King Louis XIV, who reportedly received over 2,000 enemas during his reign, sometimes even while holding court. He was truly the king of multitasking. 74. In ancient Mesopotamia, if a patient was sick, a healer might perform a ritual where they transferred the illness into a clay pot. Then, they'd release a live bird inside the room, believing it would carry the pot and the sickness away to the heavens. It was a beautiful ceremony with a 0% success rate. 75. Before we understood mental health, some asylums used surprise bath therapy. A patient would be walking along and a trap door would suddenly open beneath them, plunging them into a hidden tub of ice-cold water. The shock was supposed to reset their brain. Mostly, it just created a deep distrust of floors. 76. A medieval European cure for cataracts involved a procedure called couching. A person with a sharp needle would jab it directly into the patient's eye, without anesthetic, and physically push the clouded lens out of the way. It sometimes worked for a moment before the eye inevitably succumbed to infection and total blindness. 77. In the 18th century, a popular medical device was the metallic tractor. Two small metal rods that were supposed to draw out diseases from the body just by being waved over the skin. It was a massive scam that made its inventor rich, proving that people have always been willing to pay for useless, shiny gadgets. 78. A folk remedy for asthma in some parts of the world was to swallow live spiders, often disguised in a lump of butter or bread. The belief was that the spider would, clean out the lungs on its way down. All it really did was add a severe case of arachnophobia to your list of problems. 79. To stop a nosebleed, ancient Egyptians would recite a magical spell while holding a crucifix-shaped bundle of fragrant herbs under the patient's nose. If the magic failed, the backup plan was to just plug the nose with a wad of pig manure. One of those was bound to stop the bleeding, one way or another. 80. The breathalyzer was a real patented device from the 1920s designed to cure impotence. It was a vacuum pump for the penis, which would then be followed by a jolt of electricity to stimulate the nerves. It was a terrifying combination of bad physics and worse ideas, all aimed at one very sensitive area. 81. In the Middle Ages, some monks believed that whipping a mentally ill person was a valid form of treatment. They thought it would either drive the demons out or simply punish the person for the sins that they believed were causing the madness. It was a perfect storm of religious fervor and profound medical ignorance. 82. A monstrously evil belief in ancient Greece was that leprosy could be cleansed by bathing in the blood of a sacrificed child or a virgin. The idea was that the purity of the innocent could fight the disease. Thankfully, this remained a horrific fringe idea and not a standard medical practice. 83. In the early days of surgery, cleaning instruments was not a priority. In fact, a good surgeon was often proud of the layers of dried blood and grime on his coat and tools, seeing it as a sign of experience. They were basically walking advertisements for the infections they were about to give you. 84. Korsakoff's syndrome, a type of amnesia caused by alcoholism, was once treated by giving the patient more alcohol. Doctors noticed that a drink would temporarily calm the patient's agitation, so they just kept prescribing it. This, of course, only made the underlying brain damage much, much worse. 85. A bizarre ancient remedy for a sore eye involved the juice of a crushed louse. The healer would take a live louse, crush it, and then allow the resulting juice to drip directly into the affected eye. It's hard to decide what's worse, the initial eye problem or the feeling of insect guts being used as eye drops. 86. Before the invention of the defibrillator, one method for reviving a patient whose heart had stopped was the fumigator. This device would blow hot, acrid smoke from burning animal hooves and feathers directly into the patient's face to shock them back to life. It was a violent, smelly, and completely ineffective assault on the senses. 87. In the 1800s, some doctors treated deafness by creating an artificial eardrum out of a pig's bladder. They would cut a small piece of the bladder, attach it to a string, and carefully insert it into the patient's ear canal. It was a delicate, bizarre, and ultimately useless piece of biological engineering. 88. To treat a fever in the 17th century, a physician might cut a live pigeon in half and apply the warm, bleeding halves to the soles of the patient's feet. The belief was that the bird's vital spirits would draw the fever out of the body. The only thing it drew was flies. 89. One of the most famous medical fraudsters, Albert Abrams, claimed he could diagnose and cure any disease from a single drop of blood using his dynamizer machine. He'd then broadcast healing frequencies to the patient, sometimes over the phone. He became a millionaire selling this complete nonsense to desperate people. 90. A 19th century treatment for a snakebite was to cut open a chicken and place the wound directly inside the bird's warm abdominal cavity. They believed the chicken's body would absorb the venom. This didn't help the snakebite victim, and it was definitely a terrible day to be a chicken. 91. During the plague, some doctors believed the bad air, or miasma, could be fought with equally potent smells. One bizarre prescription was to capture your own flatulence in a jar. When the plague was nearby, you were to open the jar and take a deep whiff, believing your own foul air was healthier than the plague's. 92. A popular European folk cure for warts involved rubbing a live snail on them and then impaling that same snail on a thorn bush. As the snail slowly shriveled and died, your wart was supposed to magically disappear along with it. It was a very slow, unnecessarily cruel, and completely useless form of magical thinking. 93. In the early 1900s, one experimental treatment for an aortic aneurysm was to feed coils of wire directly into the bulging artery. The hope was that the wire would cause a massive blood clot to form and strengthen the wall. More often than not, it just created a new, much pointier way for the artery to rupture. 94. In medieval Italy, if someone was bitten by a supposed tarantula, the only cure was the tarantella. Victims would engage in days of non-stop manic dancing to sweat out the poison. In reality, it was a bizarre form of mass hysteria, but at least your agonizing death came with a soundtrack. 95. For centuries, a doctor's primary diagnostic tool was uroscopy. This involved examining the color, smell, and sometimes even the taste of a patient's urine. They had elaborate charts linking different shades of yellow to specific diseases. It was basically a wine tasting, but for pee, and with far worse consequences. 96. For centuries, people believed in maternal impression, the idea that a pregnant woman's thoughts or experiences could physically alter her unborn child. If she saw a rabbit, her baby might be born with a hair lip. If she was startled by a snake, the baby could have a snake-like birthmark. It was the ultimate form of victim blaming, but for birth defects. 97. A highly prized medical ingredient in the 17th century was usnea, a type of moss scraped from the skulls of executed criminals. It was powdered and applied to wounds to stop bleeding, based on sympathetic magic. You would treat a head wound with something that grew on a different, very dead head. Flawless logic. 98. Before CPR, a common method for reviving a drowning victim was to lay them stomach down over a large barrel and roll them back and forth. The idea was to physically squeeze the water out of their lungs. In reality, all it did was give the victim a final, nauseating, bumpy ride before the inevitable. 99. Need a confidence boost? The ancient Assyrians had you covered. They believed that if you wore the powdered right wing of a bat tied in a red cloth around your arm, you would become fearless and successful. It was the original and most ridiculous performance-enhancing accessory. 100. In the 19th century, Dr. Henry Tanner promoted aquariopathy, the belief that any illness could be cured by consuming nothing but water for 40 days straight. He claimed it purified the body of all toxins. In reality, it was just slow-motion starvation, professionally rebranded as a miracle cure. 101. And finally, the single dumbest idea that fueled centuries of bad medicine. The theory of the four humors. The belief that your body was filled with black bile, yellow bile, phlegm, and blood, and that all illness was just an imbalance of these fluids. This one, simple, completely wrong idea is responsible for millions of deaths by bleeding, purging, and poisoning. It's the undisputed heavyweight champion of medical stupidity. So there it is, a tour through centuries of medical madness. It's easy to laugh now, but these were once mainstream beliefs. So here's the real question. What's a popular health or wellness trend people follow today that you think will end up on a list like this in 100 years? Get controversial in the comments below. If this video made you grateful for science, the algorithm demands a sacrifice. Like and subscribe.